Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to this special episode of Lazio Lounge. Special because I was trying to think before we started this podcast. I don't remember a season where, after the 2 days of the transfer market open, Lazio already signed three players. I guess this is the first time ever, and I don't know if we will ever see it again. Right, Alistair McKenzie? Do you remember a time where Lotito signed three players in the opening day of the transfer market window?
Not even only that, three players plus a new shirt, which you're showing off today,
Yep.
plus microphone not included, plus a season ticket sale. So it's like generally things we always complain are taking really, really long time. And yeah, it's good to see, to be honest. I think when we last recorded a podcast, it was on the back of the end of the season and Baroni coming in and the protests and all this stuff. And I think one of the things we ended basically saying was like one of the only ways back for the club really to make everyone feel positive again is for them to have a good mercato. So it is a promising start. And yeah, let's get into it. So some nice, very interesting players as well.
Okay, you're talking about promising starts. I'm not sure all Lazio fans will agree with you because, yes, Lazio signed three players. Well, actually, one is for the Lazio Primavera. Let's talk about that. But Lazio started with Noslin from Verona, 15 million euros, Alistair. It's concerning from my point of view. Verona signed this player not 10 years ago, but last January for 3.5 million euros. And after pretty much 6 months, they sell it to Lazio for 15 million euros. That's a lot. That's incredible income from Verona, right? Yes, Noslin had a decent impact, a very good impact in this 6 months at Verona. But do you think that Lazio overspent this player?
No, because 15 million is nothing. I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, obviously for Lazio, in a Lazio context, we look at that thinking that's something. But like I said before, if we're realistically wanting to tick the boxes of getting someone who's a reasonably young age and who's got experience of scoring goals in a big league, of course you're going to have to spend that much money. I mean, that is not something we can complain about here. And to see a guy who's just been, yeah, for the last 6 months, pretty much on fire in Serie A with a not particularly good Verona team coming to link up with the coach who kind of unshackled him to make him find that form. I I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be the absolute game changer or the new Cheeto or anything else, but I think realistically, when we're looking at bolstering our front line for the new season, having lost Felipe Anderson, having lost Alberto, we were always going to have to spend that much money minimum to get anybody. Surely, I mean, where else are we going to find anyone?
Don't you think that for 6 months of good football, and by the way, he didn't take by storm the Serie A. He scored 5 goals and 4 assists.
I know,
Uh,
but my point is that's the trade-off, right? Because if it was a full season and those 5 goals were 10 goals or 12 goals, then you're not paying 15 million. You're paying 25, 30 million. That's just how it works.
well,
So it's
I
a bit
don't
of a
think we paid that
gamble,
much for
but
Zaccagni, right?
I don't think it's a crazy amount of money. Like I think
Okay.
for if people are going to get upset about this deal, it's fine to have concerns about it only being 6 months that he's proven himself and the fact that his career up until this point hasn't exactly been incredible. But I think the money is not something we can take a huge amount of issue with because that's if you're buying strikers who are 24 years old, it's just what you got to do nowadays.
He's a right winger, but with Barone at Verona, after that, the owner pretty much sell all the squad. He moved to centre forward. Now, I don't think he's gonna play in that position with us, right? I think he's gonna compete with Isaacsen on the right wing, and that's where he's gonna start. Do you agree with me, or do you see him moving a little bit all over the place?
Well, I think the good thing with both him and Tchaouna is they both know how to play across the entire forward line. The weird thing is they're both quite similar in that I think they both prefer being on the right wing. And as you mentioned, Isaacson there, he also prefers to be on the right wing. So we do seem to have a lot of players who are kind of wanting to be in that one specific role that's now been vacated by Anderson. It's, Baroni will know, and because Baroni has been using him as a centre forward for most of the last few months of Verona, then that's clearly a position that Baroni thinks he can be a success in. And it is worth mentioning. I know you sound skeptical. It's only 5 goals, but it is worth pointing out as well. Those goals were almost entirely against big teams. He was scored against Inter, Juve, Milan, Fiorentina, Atalanta. This is a guy who seems to not be bothered about the level of opposition he's up against. And for me, that's a lot more encouraging than if his 5 goals, 3 of them had been in the Coppa Italia against Benevento or something. It does tell me more about this guy. So the question is kind of with the Castellanos Ciro thing is my question to you is, do you think this is intentionally the way the club were wanting to go? Maybe this is a bit too clever and thinking ahead, but it seems to me like a good way around that situation, which is a bit difficult as we've been through a lot of times, Tati and Ciro being the guys you're relying on. If you sign a player who's not actually, he doesn't have to be a striker, that doesn't mean you're automatically telling Ciro and Tati you're replacing them, but you're kind of bringing in a guy who can play there if the same problem persists next season.
Well, one of the question is, what do you think about Tati Castellanos? Because rumors are that Girona, his former club, called Lotito to get back his former number 9. And Lotito said, no, thank you. You have to give us 20 million euros, which is pretty hard to imagine after this incredible season from Tati Castellanos. So it looks like Lazio believe that next year Tati will play much better than this year. And this is one of the reasons why Dia, who was heavily linked with Lazio, hasn't moved to Rome yet, because we already have 2 number 9s. If Castellano doesn't leave, then Dia won't arrive. So yeah, I think Noslin can play there, and he can be a plan C. Even Tchaouna, who we didn't mention so far, the second signing of the season, can play in that position, because with Salernitana, he's not a real number 9, but can play in that position as well. And this time we paid him only 6 million euros then, Alistair. So this is a bargain, right?
Yeah, the Tchaouna signing I am really excited about. I think it's a rare example of Lazio getting ahead of the curve, because he's just had a bit of a breakthrough season, which isn't easy to do because you're playing for Salernitana and they were by far the worst team in the league. So when you say breakthrough season, you have to say that within the context, I think, of Salernitana. Because again, I think if you look at his numbers, they don't jump out as being amazingly impressive. But I think within that team, he's certainly one of the guys who's caught the eye more, and I guess come away with more credit from the season than almost anyone else. And because he's 20 years old, he's hopefully only got one way to go in terms of his development. I think he's an exciting player, Vittorio. He looks like he can do a bit of everything. He's strong, he's quick, he creates goals, he scores goals. He seems to love this move of coming in from the right and just smashing it with his left foot. And and has had some success with that. But a guy again, I guess it depends which way Baroni's going to set this team up and how he's intending to play. But he looks like another guy who can essentially be put anywhere within a kind of front 3, I guess.
Yes, but I don't think he's going to be considered a starter, right? Or at least I hope he's not going to be a starter. He can be a surprise. Maybe, if he starts playing well, he can become one of the starters. But, I mean, thinking that you have no more Luis Alberto and you play Tchaouna instead, that would be a massive downgrade, right? Even though I really love Tchaouna and I think it's a perfect signing. I think in 2 years' time, this could be one of the most important players we signed, because he has everything. But at the moment, he's not ready to compete at that level, right?
I'm smiling because you're you're kind of feeding into what everyone's just been debating since Italy got knocked out of the Euros. This hesitance to trust young players. Why can't we have him in the team straight away? He's just been playing a full season with a Serie A team. He's proven that he can do it. I don't see why he can't be fighting for a starting spot immediately.
I think he can fight for a starting position, but I don't think he's Champions League level. I mean, if our goal this season, and I'm asking you if you think that's our goal, is to finish in the top four, at least fourth, do you think Tchaouna is the player, or do you think you have to bring some competition, someone better? I mean, at the moment, fighting for the trequartista job is Tchaouna and Pedro. I'm not saying Pedro's going to start, but I don't think both of them are ready for a Champions League team.
Do you see him more as a trequartista than a winger? Because I always thought of him more as a right winger, to be honest.
Yeah, but we have Isaacsen and Noslin there. So, I mean, how many right wingers do you want to have? And on the left side, we have Oli Zaccagni, so maybe he can move to the left. But centrally, we have none. I mean, at the moment, it's probably Pedro starting centrally behind Castellanos. So I think that Tchaouna, I think he can play there. He's suited to play in that position. So I think that's where he has more chance to play, right?
Possibly. Yeah, I mean, to me, the reason I like him wide more is that he seems to me better suited as like a more explosive player. You know, he's quite physical. He's fast. He dribbles the ball well. He's not gonna necessarily knit things together in tight spaces in the same way. I mean, he might be able to develop that side of his game too, but I see him certainly at this stage of his development as being more effective out wide. But this is what I mean with him and Noslin. I think we're probably going to see a fair bit of experimentation. And it is another great thing about getting these two guys, because having players who are versatile enough to move around the front line is a huge benefit. And yeah, I think we appreciate that more than ever right now, having been through the season we've been through with the two completely contrasting styles we've had from our two coaches. But I think both of these guys you can probably mold into different roles.
Not only one thing very important is that they're going to be able to start the Ronso summer camp, which doesn't happen very often for new signing, right? They usually arrive end of the summer transfer when the season is started. Let's not forget that Guendouzi arrived when? After the third day of Serie A. So you don't have time for experiments there. Instead, arriving now, give Baroni the option to test him in different friendly games, in different position. And I think that's key. That's very important. That's why Lazio is pushing to sign Derebashiro as well, who could be a fourth signing. Again, he looks like another trequartista eventually. So I think that's good for us to have them sign immediately so they can all reach our own at the beginning of the summer transfer, right, Alistair?
And the reason you're saying this is because the expectation is that Baroni will play a 4-2-3-1, right? We should underline that. It seems to be kind of the assumption people are going off at the moment. I just don't think I think the trequartista role, you can use, I guess, play that role in many different ways, but I don't think there's anyone particularly obviously suited to it in the squad, to be honest. So it's no wonder they're looking at signing players there. I do agree with you on the thing about if your ambition is aiming high and being in the Champions League and so on. You're right. These aren't the signings who are going to get you there. They're not the guys who drag this team from being, what were we, seventh best in Italy up to being fourth. But that's not to say they're poor signings. I still think it's great to see the club investing in youth and actually, taking advantage of opportunities from relegated teams or whatever. But for example, like a guy like Goodmanson, who's been linked to Lazio, I find that really unlikely. But were that to happen, that would be a big statement signing, because that is a guy who's just been one of the players of the year in the league, who is a very natural trequartista. I think who really would lift the quality of the squad and excite people. I think you're probably going to come back and say, "Oh, he's just had one season at Genoa."
No, I was going to say, well, let's talk about Munos. That is the third signing before going to the possible other signing from Lazio. This is a signing, Alistair, that I have to admit I don't like at all, because he's leaving Barcelona. He's leaving the Barcelona Primavera, where he hardly played in the league. I think he played not more than 30 minutes so far. He played a lot, 321 minutes in the youth league, but he started 4 games on 6 that they played, something like that. So, and for me, the youth academy is to rise up the kids you started from, when they were 8, 9, 10, and bring it to the first squad. Signing these type of players and bring them immediately to the Primavera, I'm not sure it's the right move to make. And the question mark is, if Barcelona is leaving this kid going away for free, then something tell me there's something that it's not amazing of this player, right? If Barcelona doesn't trust him, doesn't believe him, then why should Lazio, right?
Well, I'd never heard of this guy before, needless to say. So I started doing a bit of reading about him. It does seem like he's one of these guys who everyone was very excited about when he was, 14, 15 years old. There's a story about how, while he was at Malaga still, the club president basically offered him a blank check in order to stay at the club, because he was wanted by everyone like Real Madrid and Barca, and eventually he went to Barca instead to join La Masia. And I saw an article also from a Barcelona website, basically, that was quite critical of the club about this, because the writer at least was saying that he is one of the most promising players that they had in the youth system, and the problem is that he's just not being given the game time. And obviously the competition to get into a Barcelona midfield isn't exactly small, so it's no surprise that didn't really happen for him. The thing that would annoy me the most is if he does what you say and they just put him in the Primavera, because that is utterly pointless. He's not 17, he's 19, and he's going to be 20 in a few months. If you're going to sign this guy and he's going to join on 3 years, you need to use those 3 years to actually find out if he's ready, chuck him in there. Because I don't mind getting in a promising young player on a free transfer, but whenever we've kind of got excited by one of these deals before, it's let us down, mostly because they've never really been given an opportunity. And I don't see why we can't have this guy in the first team to begin with, and then make a decision after that about whether he needs to go back into the youth system or not, rather than the other way around.
Especially this season where we don't have, we are without Luis Alberto, Felipe Anderson. We need forward. We need midfielders, etc. So it would be interesting to see if he's going to be called to the Alonso training camp, because as we were mentioning before, he could be tested in friendly games and see how things goes. Obviously, his friendly games, especially the first one, are pretty much easy, so it doesn't prove anything. But at least you see if he can play at that level or not. I mean, we had players like Crespi, Diego Gonzalez, Sana Fernandez, etc., who have never been tested in the first squad. So it raised eyebrow. You ask why they never had a chance. So this is concerning. So rumors are that he would be moved to the Primavera. I hope he has at least a chance to prove that he has something to test, to see if he can play. Yeah.
But you say that, how does a player in the Lazio Primavera prove that? Because it seems to me that, and no matter how well they play for the Primavera, it doesn't really make a difference. Yeah. I don't think they prove anything in the Primavera, and that's kind of my issue, is that you're not going there to prove a point to the first team coach, because none of the first team coaches we've had really since probably the start of Inzaghi's time, because he'd just been with the Primavera, Since then, I don't think anyone's really paid the slightest bit of attention to
No.
what's going on in that team. So that's what
Maybe Baroni could be
frustrates me a
different.
bit.
I don't know.
Well, maybe, yeah. I don't know.
But yeah, that's a huge question mark. Alison, one thing that surprised me a lot, and I mean, the listener of our podcast knows this. We've been talking about left back, right back all season long, right? Complaining about the performance. Marusic has been dreadful. Lazar is not a player of a couple of years ago. Pellegrini hardly played this season. His eye is his eye. But apart from Cabal, we have not been linked to left back or right back so far. And I think this is something that we need to improve massively because last year was probably our biggest weakness, right?
Yeah. I mean, it is good. This is one of the most encouraging things about the club getting some business done early is that, as we've said several times, there's so much to be done this summer. I mean, there's a lot of pretty much every area of this team, possibly with the exception of the goalkeeper or the kind of
midfield.
defensive midfielders, does need improved or added to. But you're right, the fullbacks is is glaringly obvious part of the team. I hope they've got some idea and we just haven't heard anything about it. But you're right, everything at the moment has been about the other end of the pitch. But I guess you could maybe say it's harder to get the opportunities in attack because you generally have to pay more, and generally the more talented attackers are signed up pretty quickly. Lazio don't want to be left in a position where they're having to shell out a load of money on a risky deal, or do what Roma did and spend millions on a 1-year loan deal for Lukaku, that kind of deal. So I don't know. I can only hope that there's something going on in the background there.
Cabal has been linked to Lazio, another Verona player. What do you think about him? He started as central midfield and then moved to left back, if I'm not wrong. Do you think that would be an upgrade for us?
Yeah, well, it's another one of these guys who kind of came out of nowhere in the last 6 months, or so it felt anyway. Verona is a club we've done a lot of business with before, so I guess this is why there's so many Verona players being linked to Lazio, and Baroni having been there, of course, as well. Yeah, I'm not against it. I mean, to be honest, at the moment, anything. I mean, I quite enjoyed your run through of all our fullbacks there, and then you just got to Husai is Husai, and that's enough reason. But yeah, I think we do need to find more dynamism in that area. I think that's the main thing for me, is that we're so lacking in any sort of attacking threat, any sort of like speed and directness and energy, and you don't need everybody to be, a kind of Cafu style bumming fullback. But I think we're too far the opposite direction right now, where our fullbacks tend to be guys who just get on the ball and turn around and pass it backwards because they don't know what else to do. So yeah, I think with that in mind, and then you kind of change to getting a more dynamic player would be something at least.
And at the moment, the rumors are that Baroni said no to selling Pellegrini. There were rumors that some Serie A club were interested in the player, and Baroni said no. And the only fullback on the market is Isai, which had a decent Euro, right? Nothing special, but nothing dramatic. I mean, not Scamacca style Euro, I would say. So I hope he gets some traction. Maybe we can get some offer, and we can sign someone. Because I mean, the central defenders, we are fine. Yeah, Casale had a dreadful season. I think he's going to bounce back. But we have the Gila, Patrick, Romagnoli. We're fine there. But our fullbacks have been dreadful. Marusic could leave and go and join Milinkovic Savic. That would be good. But we need to sign at least a couple there, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Cabal will be enough.
Yeah, no, I do agree. So yeah, that's another area. I mean, I think It kind of depends on the outgoings a bit as well. I guess they brought in a little bit of money from Luis Alberto, not as much as we would have liked in the past, but there's also been Maximiano has now been sold again at a loss, not a huge amount of money, but I think considering he was giving nothing to the team, at least they brought something in there. Yeah, I don't know. You're more on top of the kind of balance sheets than I am. I mean, what's the general sense of how much money this team's actually got to spend in this market, or how clever they have to be about it?
Well, one thing important to mention is that with Luis Alberto, Felipe Anderson, and Kamada leaving, we had a massive drop on the salary that Lazio is paying. So that was mandatory for the club. We had to decrease that, and we did. And signing youngsters is good because Noslin is on 1.5 million euros. That is 2 million less than the 3.5 Luis Alberto was. I guess Tchaouna as well is around 1 million. So we definitely decreased that. Let's not forget that we have still the Champions League revenue that will arrive. So we have some money to spend. And I think we have to make a big signing, Alistair. Noslin, Tchaouna, etc. They are promising players, but we lost Luis Alberto, Felipe Anderson, Kamada. We cannot say that we have the same quality at the moment with Noslin and Tchaouna, right? We need to sign a big player.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm all for making sensible signings to kind of raid the relegated or bottom of the table teams, but you don't want to make too many of those signings, or else you end up with a squad that's made up of relegated or bottom of the table players. So you need to be a bit careful there. Yeah, I don't know. I think it does seem there seems to have been a change of tune. You notice the difference between this summer and the summer under Maurizio Sarri, when definitely the names being linked to Lazio when we had Sarri were more impressive and more ambitious than they are now. Now, I don't know how much of that is obviously real and how much wasn't, because with Sarri, obviously, he knew who he wanted, but that didn't make it any likelier that the club would actually go and sign those players for him. And his famous line about wanting, player A and ending up with player D. But yeah, we're already seeing this kind of new dynamic at work, I guess, where I don't know, Baroni must be having a say in it if they're looking at his old players. I mean, surely he's encouraging that. You're not convinced?
No, and I know what we're going to talk now is not going to be happy, but the dream signing of Claudio Lotito is your friend Greenwood. It's going to be difficult. Manchester United is asking 35 million euros. So Lazio never paid anything around that fee for a player. But I think he's going to be a game changer if Lazio sign him. I know you have some concern about the player, but what's your take? Do you think he's the player that can change this club?
Well, I've not really seen him play for about 3 years or something, because he spent so long being banned because he had criminal charges against him, and pretty horrendous ones at that. And there's certainly a massive black mark against his name, definitely in the UK. I don't know, maybe this story hasn't kind of traveled overseas as much as it was such a big deal in the UK, but I know he was cleared of the charges ultimately, but that hasn't necessarily, if you see the way everything panned out, that hasn't really changed everyone's opinions about him entirely. Part of the reason United dropped him, sponsors dropped him.
Well,
not a guy I'd really be comfortable celebrating in a Lazio shirt, put it that way.
Well, it's the reason why he's available for Lazio, right? Because no Premier League, no English club will ever sign him, right?
But the other thing is, though, we're talking about, what did you say, 35 million? I mean, That is a serious amount of money.
But
And you're
he's
talking about
22
a
years
guy
old.
who's hardly played. He's had one season with Getafe. And okay, he's young and he was once regarded as United's next big thing. But again, he's another right winger, so he's not necessarily the answer to any, talking from a football perspective, he's not really the answer to any obvious necessity in this squad right now either. So I feel like that money could be better spent elsewhere anyway, in a footballing sense, just because when I look at that squad, like we've just been saying, it's like the fullbacks, trequartista, probably a striker. Those are kind of the areas I would look to more at the moment anyway, if you're going to spend that much.
Don't you think he can play trequartista behind Ciro or Tati?
I don't know. I mean, I've never seen it. It doesn't mean it's not happened, but I don't know. You need the guy who's playing trequartista behind Ciro and Tati to be good at passing the ball, because
well, he can finish it himself, right? I mean, seeing how Tati and Ciro played last year, it's better to find someone who scores goal rather than do assist, because Tati had plenty of chances last season and didn't score. So the other player linked to Lazio was Samardžić, another difficult signing. Udinese won 25 million euros, Alistair. And remember what happened last year. He was a done deal with Inter, and then the father came in and things got blurry. So again, very difficult. I don't know. Do you like him more than Greenwood? Do you think it would be a better solution for Lazio? He can play trequartista, even though he had the terrible Euros, right? He not like Scamacca, but bad as well, right?
It's two mentions of Scamacca. Are you wanting to do a separate podcast of Scamacca? Yeah, no, definitely, because he is, like you say, he's a more natural trequartista. It's more the role he's had. I don't think he's had as good a year this year. Last summer, he was one of the kind of more attractive players in Serie A who was being looked at. I don't think he's stood out as much this year, but certainly a talented player. I mean, if you've watched him at Udinese for the last couple of seasons or so, he's clearly got a hell of a lot of talent and technical ability. And I don't know if he needs a more expressive team in order to express himself more, because Udinese are the opposite of an expressive team a lot of the time. So yeah, that is a deal that would really excite me. I mean, when they're looking at Samardžić and Goodmanson, I was thinking, well, these guys are, they've got a bit of a proven track record, at least good young age players who would be ready for that next step, I guess, into Lazio. So yeah, that makes more sense to me. And 25 million, to be honest, that sounds about right. Again, you're probably not going to be happy with it, but that's not a fee that surprises me for a player of that caliber and that age.
Did I mention that Scamacca had a terrible Euros? I don't remember. But yeah, I want to point out that Scamacca had a terrible Euros.
The Euros? I've not heard of this. I think we should just forget.
I don't know. It's finished. It's gone. But I didn't hear anybody complain about the number 9 of Italian squad this season. I don't know why. Maybe it's because Ciro wasn't playing. So one of the problem is that we tried to put Basic in the deal, and Udinese didn't even want to hear nothing about it. Lazio has a lot of players that need to be sold or find a club that hire them at least for 1 year. We were able to sell Moro, 2.5 million euros. You mentioned Maximiano. Marcos Antonio is heading to Brazil, back to Brazil. But we have still a lot of players that risk to spend the summer in Formello. And it's very hot in Rome at the moment. So I hope they will find another destination. Do you think that players like Basic, Cancellieri, Akpak Pro that Lazio have tried to put anywhere will find a home? Because that would be more money to Lazio, maybe more players that we can sign, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, look, neither of them have lit the league up. I think that's safe to say,
Really?
Akprag, Pro, or Basic, but they have shown that they are kind of capable Serie A midfielders. So I think for a team lower down the league that's looking to kind of bolster its options, they're those kind of players. So maybe, I mean, I don't think there's going to be much change that got out of them, to be honest, but might be able to convince someone at some point. Cancellieri is a slightly different one. I mean, he actually had a pretty good year on loan, which we don't say very often about Lazio players. I still think it's quite hard to see him coming back into the squad and making a difference, but I wouldn't be against it, for Alonso pre-season, just giving him another shot. New coach, new era, really. I mean, in terms of how this attack is going to look.
Yeah.
So why not? Yeah.
To wrap it up, Alistair, there have been a lot of rumors in this month that Lazio could sell Mandas to make money to sign a top player. Would you agree on that? I mean, we are talking about youngster. Manda is 22. He was probably the biggest surprise, the biggest positive surprise of the season this year for Lazio with Hila. So, what's your take on this? Would you sell him or try to keep him and give him more time?
What's the price?
Yeah.
What would you what kind of fee though? I mean, that's the thing. Would you sell him for 10? Probably not.
No. Well, if Samazic is 25, I think
Would
Mandas should be the same amount, right?
But my point is, it's kind of like free money with Mandas because he came in with nothing expected of him, and he's been a fantastic deputy for half a year. But realistically, we can sell him and forget about it because we do have Providel, who's our number one. So we don't absolutely need him. And because we signed him for nothing, the money that's coming in is almost like a bonus. And you just don't know how the next season's going to play out. If Providel still stays fit for the full season, does Mandas just not play at all? And then do you just lose any possible transfer value you could get from Mandas right now? We've talked about this before, but it is a difficult one to get your head around and work out what the price is, what the value is there. I mean, I think certainly as soon as any offer gets into double figures, that the club should be thinking about it. Yeah.
Double figures, not more than 20 million. Double figures, so even 11.
I find that really hard to imagine, though. Who's going to pay 20 million for a guy?
He's already in the Greece national team, man.
I could play for the Greece national team. Huh?
Hey, remember you're from Scotland.
Yeah, we were at the Euros.
Not for long, to be honest.
Nobody even noticed, but we were there, I promise.
Well, no, we noticed because the fans got, you got the attention from the fans. I don't remember who said it. If you could give a prize for how you sing your anthem, Scotland would win every time the Euros.
Yeah, we won something there at least. But no, I mean, you see what my point is. I think you've got to consider it because it's kind of a free income. So I guess if another deal kind of hinged on making, whatever, 12 million worth of profit and you got that offer from Mandas, then by all means. I mean, I think he's great. Don't get me wrong. I really like him and it's been a massive boost, but it's just the Lazio financial jigsaw, really.
So basically, Greenwood for 20 million plus Mandas, you will make it.
Nah, I'm all right. Keep Mandas.
So it depends on the player. Good to know. Okay, Alistair, time to wrap it up. Thanks again for joining me. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to our Patreon to support our podcast. We really appreciate your help. Patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Memberships at $2 a month. We're going to be back as soon as Lazio sign maybe another big player. Dele Bashiru should be a done deal in this week. We hope so. Not a signing that will change our team. Do you think we are fighting for the Champions League spot this season so far, Alistair, with this signing?
Far too early to say. We'll have to wait until a bit further along the line to see where we're at and where the other teams are at. But yeah, we'll see.
It's going to be very, very interesting because Napoli with Conte made a incredible signing, but then you have to sign players as well, and pretty much all Napoli players want to leave. So that looks interesting. But yeah, we're going to talk about the other teams another day, probably.
And
Take care, everybody.